Hi everyone. In this video we now turn to the structure of the book of Revelation. And we will see that rather than presenting a chronological map of the future, John has given us a series of parallel visions, each of which portrays spiritual principles active from the ascension of Christ until his return. By structure, I mean the way an author has organized a piece of literature, its framework or logical architecture, we might want to call it. A misunderstanding of the structure leads to a misunderstanding of the contents of that structure. Interpreters of the book of Revelation are generally divided into four groups: preterists, historicists, futurists, and idealists. My view is a combination of historicists and idealists, which I call structural parallelism. Let's take a look at each of these one at a time. The preterist position says that the entire book of Revelation, except perhaps the last two chapters, is referring to the experience of the early church. They base this position on passages such as Matthew 24:34, where Jesus says, "I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place." Preterists err, however, in their understanding of what Jesus meant when he said all these things. That expression does not refer to everything Jesus said in the Olivet Discourse, but only to those parts of that discourse wherein Jesus was preparing his disciples for the coming destruction of Jerusalem. Take a look at my series on the Olivet Discourse for a detailed explanation of this. The historicist position says John wrote the Revelation as a chronological or sequential depiction of the future, starting with the birth of Christ and ending with the New Jerusalem. So what you read in chapter 10 comes before what you read in chapter 15, according to this view. Futurists are the opposite of preterists. They understand the book as referring almost entirely to a future time just before the second coming of Christ. Books written from a futurist perspective generally see our present age as part of that future and believe Christ's coming is imminent. They are prone to look for modern events and political figures or religious figures who they think are represented by the symbolism of the apocalypse. The idealist model sees the book of Revelation as an account of spiritual truths that are present more or less throughout history, from the time of Christ until he returns again. Scholars also refer to this as the spiritual position, because its proponents believe the book is talking about spiritual principles in effect throughout history. Most who adhere to this position believe the book speaks about realities in the physical world of the early church, but that John uses these to communicate generalizable principles that apply throughout the church's history. So the book fluctuates between talking about earthly things and talking about heavenly things. Structured parallelism sees the book as divided into a set of parallel prophetic visions, each of which covers the entire period of Christian history, from the ascension of Christ to his return. Hence the story is told and retold from multiple perspectives. Each parallel section deals both with historical realities and spiritual truths. So the problem we need to work out is whether we should take the book as a chronological account of history. I think not. As I mentioned earlier, the book comprises 7 sections, each parallel to the others in time, covering the entire Christian period, from the first to the second coming of Christ. The evidence for this is, number 1, there is a lot of similarity between the trumpets and the cups. Number 2, Satan and his colleagues fall in 2 of the sections. Number 3, several of the sections end with a great battle. Number 4, each section ends with a description of the end of the age.